talking to now?
Casey.
Northern California just shook, and this time, the earthquake detection systems thought it was going to be much bigger than it was. 650,000 people received emergency alerts stretching all the way from Mendocino County down to Santa Cruz. Buildings shook, windows shattered, power went out across entire communities. A mother fell to the floor trying to reach her 7-year-old son across the hallway. A cat panicked and tried to claw its way out of the house.
What is that? Earthquake! Earthquake!
Store shelves emptied onto floors, streetlights locked into emergency mode, flashing red across darkened roads. All of this from a magnitude 5.6 earthquake. Now imagine what happens when the real one hits. Because here is what nobody is talking about in the coverage of today's Mendocino County earthquake. This was not a random tremor in an empty stretch of California wilderness. This was the Makama fault zone, a fault line that stretches for over 100 miles through Northern California, that the USGS says has a potential to produce an earthquake of up to magnitude 7.5, and that sits within one of the most seismically complex and dangerous regions on the entire west coast of North America. And magnitude 7.5 on the Makama fault is not even close to the worst-case scenario for this part of the world. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you are not already, because what is happening along the California and Pacific Northwest coast right now deserves your full attention. Let us start with what actually happened today, because the details matter. The earthquake struck at approximately 5:15 in the morning in a rural area of Mendocino County, roughly 130 miles north of San Francisco. The town that took the hardest hit was Willits, a small community of approximately 4,800 people in the heart of Northern California's Redwood Country. Magnitude 5.6, and the region had not seen a quake this strong since 1940.
What is that? Earthquake! Earthquake!
86 years. Minor injuries were reported, structural damage to several buildings. A Rite Aid pharmacy had its awning structure pull away from the building, badly damaging support pilings. The local Safeway supermarket took a significant hit, not structurally, but everything on the shelves ended up on the floor. Most restaurants in the area closed due to power outages. Road damage is being assessed. The full extent of structural damage to private homes may never be accurately known, because residents in rural communities like this often deliberately avoid reporting damage to avoid being red tagged or yellow tagged by inspectors. A bureaucratic process many people in this part of California actively resist. But here is what is more significant than the damage reports. The earthquake detection systems that monitor Northern California initially registered this event as potentially much larger than a 5.6. That is why 650,000 people received emergency alerts. The automated systems, designed to get warnings out as fast as possible, flagged this as a potentially serious event before the full picture was available. And they were not entirely wrong to be cautious. Because the Makama fault zone, where this earthquake occurred, is not a minor geological feature. It runs for more than 100 miles through Northern California. The USGS classifies the hazard for large earthquakes along this particular fault as high. The fault has the capacity to produce a magnitude 7.5 earthquake, an event that would be catastrophically more powerful than what happened this morning. And that would affect not just 4,800 people in Willits, but millions of people across a much wider region. To put that in perspective, A magnitude 7.5 releases approximately 180 times more energy than a magnitude 5.6. The shaking would not be slightly worse, it would be in a completely different category of destruction.
The water splashed from side to side.
And the Makama fault does not exist in isolation. It is part of a broader, deeply interconnected system of active fault lines that runs the entire length of California and extends north through Oregon, Washington State, and into British Columbia, Canada. This is where the real story begins. The San Andreas Fault is the name most people know. It runs roughly 800 miles through California, from the Salton Sea in the south to the Point Arena area in Northern California, where it connects with other fault systems, including the area near Mendocino County. The San Andreas has produced some of the most destructive earthquakes in American history. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake that killed an estimated 3,000 people and destroyed much of the city. The 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake that killed 63 people, collapsed sections of the Bay Bridge, and caused a freeway overpass to pancake during the World Series. The 1994 Northridge earthquake in Los Angeles that killed 57 people and caused over $20 billion in damage. Each of those events was a reminder, and each time the rebuilding happened, life returned to normal, and the memory of what the ground is capable of doing slowly faded back into the background. But the ground did not forget. Seismologists have a term for this, the seismic gap. It refers to the dangerous psychological and political space that opens up between when a fault last ruptured and when the geological evidence says it will rupture again. The longer that gap stretches, the harder it becomes for governments, developers, and ordinary people to maintain urgency around a threat that feels increasingly abstract. And in California, that gap has been stretching for a long time in some critical places. The southern section of the San Andreas Fault, the segment running through Los Angeles, has not produced a major surface rupture since 1857. That is 168 years ago. Geologists estimate that this segment of the fault ruptures on average every 100 to 150 years, which means by any reasonable geological calculation, it is overdue. When that rupture comes, current estimates from the USGS and the California Office of Emergency Services project that a major San Andreas earthquake in Southern California could kill more than 1,800 people, injure 50,000 more, leave 270,000 people displaced from their homes, and cause economic damage in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Those are the official government projections. Some independent researchers believe those numbers are conservative. But even the San Andreas is not the biggest threat on the West Coast. That distinction belongs to the Cascadia subduction zone. The Cascadia subduction zone is a 700-mile-long fault system that runs offshore from Northern California all the way up through Oregon and Washington State and into southern British Columbia. Unlike the San Andreas, which is a strike-slip fault where two plates grind horizontally past each other, Cascadia is a subduction zone, where one tectonic plate is diving underneath another. The Juan de Fuca plate is being forced beneath the North American plate, and the stress from that process has been building for more than 300 years. The last time the Cascadia subduction zone fully ruptured was January 26, 1700. We know the exact date not from American records. There were no written records in the Pacific Northwest at that time, but from Japanese historical documents that recorded a tsunami arriving on Japanese shores with no corresponding earthquake in Japan. Researchers worked backward from that tsunami to determine the date and approximate magnitude of the Cascadia rupture. The answer? Approximately magnitude 9.0. A magnitude 9.0 earthquake on the Cascadia subduction zone today would be the most catastrophic natural disaster in recorded American history. And here is something that very few people outside of seismological research circles fully appreciate. The Cascadia fault does not rupture all at once in every event. In some historical ruptures, only the southern section broke. In others, the entire 700-mile length ruptured simultaneously. The difference between a partial rupture and a full rupture is the difference between a catastrophic regional disaster and a civilizational event for the Pacific Northwest. A full rupture generates a tsunami that does not just affect local coastlines. It sends waves across the entire Pacific Ocean, reaching Hawaii, Japan, and the coast of Alaska within hours. The 1700 Cascadia rupture produced exactly that kind of trans-Pacific tsunami. Scientists found evidence of it in sediment layers as far away as Japan, and in the oral histories of indigenous communities along the northwest coast who described the ocean pulling back and then returning with devastating force. The shaking alone would last 4 to 5 minutes, not seconds, minutes. 4 to 5 minutes of continuous, violent ground motion across the entire Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Eugene, Olympia, Victoria, smaller communities up and down the coast. Within minutes of the rupture, a tsunami would begin moving toward shore. The coastline of Oregon and Washington would have between 15 and 30 minutes of warning time before waves arrive. In some low-lying coastal communities, that is not enough time to evacuate. FEMA has modeled this scenario. Their projections estimate that a full Cascadia rupture could kill more than 11,000 people, injure 27,000 more, and leave up to 1 million people in need of immediate shelter. Bridges along Interstate 5, the main north-south highway connecting the entire Pacific Northwest, would likely be destroyed or severely damaged. The region's water, power, and communications infrastructure would be compromised across a multi-state area. Recovery time is estimated at years, in some cases decades. Those numbers have been public for years. They were published in a widely read 2015 article in The New Yorker under the headline, "The Really Big One." Government agencies updated their planning documents. Emergency managers held workshops. Some coastal communities installed tsunami warning sirens and built vertical evacuation structures. And then life went on. Today, in cities like Portland and Seattle, significant numbers of older concrete and masonry buildings constructed before modern seismic codes remain standing exactly as they were originally built. Retrofitting programs exist. Funding for those programs has been inconsistent. Political will to prioritize seismic resilience over other budget pressures has been intermittent. Sound familiar? This is exactly the pattern we discussed in the aftermath of the Venezuela earthquake. A country that knew the risk, that had written the codes, that had studied the history, and that, over decades of other pressures and competing priorities, allowed the gap between knowing and preparing to grow wider and wider, until the fault made the decision for them. The difference between Venezuela and the Pacific Northwest is not that one region is more vulnerable than the other. Both site on active plate boundaries. Both have populations concentrated in areas of high seismic risk. Both have significant portions of their built environment constructed before modern earthquake standards. The difference so far is time. The Cascadia fault has not ruptured in 325 years, and every year that passes without a major earthquake makes it slightly harder to maintain the argument that preparedness spending should be a priority right now today, this budget cycle. What happened in Mendocino County this morning was a reminder. Modest in scale, serious enough to knock items off shelves and cut power to thousands, but well within the range of events that California absorbs and recovers from in days. The question it raises is the same question that the Venezuela earthquake, the Japan earthquakes, and the Philippines earthquake have all raised in recent weeks. Not whether a larger earthquake will come. The geological record is unambiguous on that point. Major earthquakes will continue to strike the Pacific coast of North America. The Cascadia subduction zone will rupture again. The southern San Andreas will produce a major event in Los Angeles. The Makama fault could produce a magnitude 7.5. None of this is speculation. It is what the ground beneath these cities has done before, and it is what it will do again. The only question is what will be standing when it does. Subscribe and hit the bell for updates as this situation develops and as new seismic activity continues to emerge across the Pacific coast.